Hello, and welcome to the second video in my Devblog series. If you are unfamiliar with the project, I'm creating a space MMO by myself inspired by games such as Battlestar Galactica Online. If this is your first time, I strongly suggest checking out my first video to get you up to speed on the project so far. It's been a busy week here for me in a very snowy Gothenburg, with everyone back to work full time, so I've deliberately tackled a number of smaller tasks where I have found time, rather than start on any of the bigger core systems, which I'm saving for next week. Also, just a quick note, this isn't entirely in chronological order. I've tried to group things together, even if I might have added to something a couple of days later, for example. One of the first things I knew I needed to add was a simple escape menu for exiting the game, and later for adjusting the game settings. I was getting a bit tired of needing to hard close the game each time, so this was an easy fix. Another UI element I felt was absolutely missing was a target speed indicator. In the game, you control ship speed using the scroll wheel, but without any indicator, you can't actually tell what speed you've set your ship to. So I've added a simple slider to represent the target speed. Essentially, it just sets the value max to whatever the max speed of the ship you are currently in. I think later on I'll probably make the handle the target speed and the fill to be the current speed, since ships have a time to accelerate and decelerate. But for now, this is good. Next up was adding in a bunch more ships for us to be able to fly. I already had the models done for these, so I just needed to give them a set of parameters that made sense and hook up all the components for controlling engine audio and thruster effects. Currently, the only animation or visual effects that we have on the ships are the thrusters, for which I'm using a particle system prefab that I made earlier and adding them over the engines on the ship model. Our engine thruster component then scales the lifetime, or length in a practical sense, of these thrusters based on the ship's current speed, allowing us to use the same system for each ship. Modularity saves a lot of time. Same applies to engine sound. It's the same sound used for all the ships, with the game changing the pitch of the sound based on the current speed of the ship. So now we have a bunch of extra flyable ships to complete an initial roster of 10, from fighter all the way up to carrier. I've been playing around with different speeds, turn rates, and camera distance to get each ship feeling right, but I know that this is something I will continue to tweak as we go. As I will mention later on, I've also made the world space much bigger, and in doing so realised that all the ships were way too slow for the size of the playable space, so every ship has had its speed doubled. In other things, I wanted to have the asteroids in the game slowly rotating to make the space feel a little more real and live, so I've written a super basic client-side component here to rotate each asteroid in a random direction at a random speed, which I can configure a minimum and maximum for. It's very basic, but works well, and I'll no doubt be messing with this more at a later point. This does bring up an obvious point regarding risk when doing something on the client side. For these asteroids, it will mean that every player has a slightly different rotation, which could, depending on the size and shape of the asteroid, mean that the player might be able to see another player attempting to hide behind a rock, if the rotation is significantly different. Next, I did some work on the NPCs, since as it stands today, the movement and behaviour doesn't properly align with player ships. The first issue was the turning. When NPCs pick a new target position to head towards, they instantly turn to face their new direction. So the fix here was to have them use the same parameters and behaviours for turning as the player ships do. This is a very simple change, and it has the ships moving and turning in a much more realistic way, which is great. Currently, the NPC spawns allow the ships to move around within a defined radius. But this radius is simply a flat plane, meaning none of the ships would actually use the full 3 dimensions available to them. Again, this is something I changed this week to allow them to operate within a sphere, with each new target position being within that sphere. Visually for players, this feels a lot better, seeing NPCs in all directions. I got a question on last week's video specifically touching on server scaling in regards to how you scale servers and how much it costs. It's an interesting question, but unfortunately the answer is simply, it depends. In my game, like many MMOs, I use a fully server authoritative model for security, which incurs extra server load than those that don't. But every game is different, depending on size, scale of the game itself, optimization, number of players, and so on and so forth. We can divide the load on the server, in basic terms, into ambient load and per player load. Our ambient load is how much server resources consumed just running the sector without any players, handling NPC movement, NPC combat, spawning and despawning asteroids, and later on things like dynamic events and more. We then have the per player load, which is, in essence, how much server resource does each player consume when performing normal operations. This information is critical to making sure we develop the server code, hardware, and scaling to provide a smooth experience for players. Regardless, it's too early to know these things for my game yet, since I haven't developed many of the key features that will impact server performance. But I have been doing some tinkering, as you can see, to get some basic feedback from the server on what is consuming resource, and I've made some minor changes, such as separating the broadcast that sends information out to the players from the main loop, putting each send into a queue that is handled by a background worker. This ensures that the main loop of the server isn't ever bottlenecked by the broadcast, and if the broadcast ever slips, it has a chance to catch up independently. On the back of this, I have added the first bit of persistence to player accounts. Now with the game saving and restoring player position, ship, and various currencies and resources, which is critical functionality I need for the development plans over the next week, which will be starting work on the core ship module and equipment system. Lastly, as you can see, I've been playing around with the worldspace to make the sector feel more interesting, but it certainly needs more work. Quick edit, actually that's not the last thing. I also made some small changes to the chat window at the bottom left side of the screen. I felt that seeing as a lot of the functionality was largely redundant at the minute, and also just because of the size it was taking up, I wanted to rework it so it wasn't occupying so much real estate on the screen. Let me know what you think about this change in the look. It's obviously a lot more simple, but I think it's much nicer with it being a lot smaller than it was before. I'll be doing a follow-up video diving into some of the design choices I've made for the project from a gameplay perspective, so look forward to that shortly. Thank you everyone for following along with this project so far. Please consider subscribing to keep seeing the latest updates and support the project, and don't be afraid to leave your ideas, suggestions, feedback or questions in the comments below. Have a great day.